Excellent. So, welcome everyone. We are in our third session of the goal setting workshops that we've been doing. And today we're going to be talking about achieving your goals through action. So, I know we've had a little bit of dialogue along the way as far as, kind of what does that look like and what can we do about that? But hopefully today I'm going to give you a couple of tools to be able to think about with regard to taking action, and maybe some things you hadn't really thought about that might be getting in your way. So, what I'm going to ask everybody who is here live with us, but also anybody who's watching the recording, is I do want you to take out just even a small piece of paper. It could be a post it note, right? Because we are going to do a little bit of an activity toward the end of our session today. So, if we think about where we've been, right, we've been talking about kind of those first two components. The first is the power of the long term goal, right? And the fact that it does give us that destination, it gives us that GPS, that guidance, and the importance of having our why go along with that, right? So, why do we want to achieve this? Why is this important, right? And those two components working together, then creating our compelling vision, right? So, really being able to kind of put these two pieces together so that we have something that's very, very grounded and when we're looking at our goal. So today, our focus being on taking action, right, is really, to use an analogy, kind of that third leg of the stool, right, where, you know, without taking action, obviously no goals get accomplished, right? But I think sometimes what happens is we create a plan of action, right? And that's an action step in and of itself, but we don't actually execute the plan, right? We don't take the actions that are all associated with the plan. So I want us to think beyond just the plan of action. I do honestly believe the plan of action is important, right? Creating an action plan, having where you're going to go, what you need to do, all of that is super important, right? But I also think that we need to say, okay, what is our commitment to actually getting this stuff done? And I will be completely transparent and I will share some examples today as we go through things. But I am not the best at always looking at fulfilling all of those action steps in an action plan, right? I will get really going. We talked about kind of the uh-oh effect, right? I'll get going, I'll kind of lose momentum, and then halfway through I'll jump back in and be like, oh man, I got to get going, I got to finish this goal. Let's see. So what we want to really think about is, how do we create a plan of action, create an action plan that is going to inspire action for us? And how are we going to then commit to some of those actions, right? Because we need to commit to those actions to actually achieve our goals. So, when we think about those goals, those ideas that we have, they do get us excited, they do get us impassioned, right? And then it comes down to the to-dos. And to be very honest, when we write action plans, our to-dos are actually a little bit too big, right? And some of you have been through some of my time management courses and I'll talk about this, but our brains actually cannot tell the difference between a big to do, meaning something that has multiple steps under it, and a very easy to do, right? Something that you can check off really quickly. It looks at those two as the same thing. So, what happens when you have an action plan that has a big to do on it, when that sits up against something that is easy to do, right? That can easily be checked off, we naturally will go toward the easily checked off item rather than looking at that big to do, right? Because it's just overwhelming. It's too much, right? Because we haven't broken it down. And I'll just give an example. Let's say a goal for you for this year is to clean out your stuff, right? You want to, kind of get rid of the clutter, however you define it. And one of your action steps in your plan is to clean the basement, right? Well, cleaning the basement is a big to do. It's not just something you can easily check off the list. There are multiple steps that have to happen in order to clean the basement. Um, but even you might be like, okay, well, let me break it down. I just want to work on this portion of the basement. That in and of itself is still too big, right? Because then if you're like me, I walk to that section of the basement and I go, ugh, right? Like there's just too much. There's too much to look at. There's too much to go through. I start going through boxes and I'm like, oh, remember this, right? So, that's even too big. But if I said in my action plan, you know what, you're just going to, what you're going to do for this particular action is just clean off these two shelves, that is much more check offable, if that's a word, right? Than clean the basement or clean a whole section of the basement. I can go to those two shelves. I can look at those two shelves. I can make the decisions that need to be made. I can clean off those two shelves or organize them or whatever the project is, right? And I can check it off my list. So when we're creating our action plans, we want to look at those steps that we're choosing, and we want to make sure that they're doable, that they're small enough that we can check them off very, very easily, right? And and we have to be honest with ourselves. I'll use another example from, again, my own world, right? If I'm marketing a program, I'll be like, oh, send out this email, right? Send out the email that a workshop is opened or something like that. Well, there are actually components that go underneath there. You have to get the list together. If you don't have the list together, you have to create the email, right? You have to draft it, you have to edit it, right? Maybe you have to create a landing page. So just to send the email has maybe or six steps underneath it. If I don't break out those five or six steps and I look at send an email, my brain goes, well, that should be pretty easy to do, right? But hey, here's something easier, and I do something else, right? So we want to be thinking about, how do I break things down to their simplest form? And a couple of you have already kind of been through this with me, but one of the resources that I recommend a lot is The Slight Edge. It's a book by Jeff Olson. The philosophy is what you see at the top: small actions actually equal big results. And I have a quick video that just kind of talks through this philosophy with some really good examples. So let's take a look. Oh,
Most people can't think big.
actually, I
This is
need
how
to stop. I put the wrong link in there. So I will explain the philosophy, and I will send you the link to the video that I wanted to show you. But basically, what Jeff talks about in his book is it's all about those daily small choices that we're making, daily small actions that we're taking, that actually will get us to our goal. And one of the examples that he'll talk about very frequently is, let's say it's lunchtime and you want something to drink, and you have the choice between a soda and a glass of water, right? And you're like, oh gosh, that soda would taste really good. In the long run, right, it's not good for you. It's not healthy for you. In the short term, you're like, what is one soda going to do, right, to my overall health? Well, his premise is, if we can take those small, easy actions, right, like drinking the glass of water instead of the soda, then we can not only build the habit, but we start to compound the positive effects of drinking that water every day versus the soda. The caveat here is because it's so easy to choose the, water or soda, right? That's an easy choice. It's not causing a lot of stress or anything. It's also very easy not to choose the water and choose the soda, right? So as we're going through and as we are looking at our goals and we're sitting there and saying, okay, today, this is my small little step I need to take, but I would rather X, Y, and Z. So maybe you want to get in better health and you have set for your daily action today that you want to walk for 15 minutes, right? Easy to do. You have time in your schedule to do it, etc. But you sit there and say, let me just check email one more time. And suddenly that 15 minutes is gone, right? You made that choice, right? And you've, not necessarily said, oh, well, you know what, that's not going to affect my health for the long term. But then we do that day after day. We do that, we start becoming inconsistent with our behaviors. And all of a sudden, we're down the road and we wanted to kind of walk 15 minutes every day and we haven't done that, and then we actually struggle to achieve our goal, right? So the other thing that Jeff talks about in the book, when we take these small actions, we start to own our responsibility for those actions, right? So if I drink the water, I choose the water. Every day I'm faced with that choice, soda or water, and I keep choosing the water, right? I'm actually owning my goal by doing that, and I'm owning the responsibility for my actions. But the same goes if I choose the soda, right? When I get to the end of the year and let's say I haven't met my physical goals because I've been drinking soda every day, right? I have to own that responsibility. I own that responsibility because if I'm in that moment saying, okay, I have this choice, and you know what, today I'm not going to drink the water, I'm going to drink the soda. And I've done that consistently over time. When I get to the end of my time frame for my goal, I have to own that. I own that responsibility. I drank soda at lunch instead of water, right? So it sounds very, very easy. And it sounds very simplistic, but I'll tell you, it is super, super powerful. Along with the compelling vision, along with the idea of that long-term goal, these small actions like all compound together to actually build the momentum for your goal, right? So whenever you're doing something and you're taking these small actions, you can't see the results. So one of the things that I've taken up along with everything else that I've been doing is I've been learning how to knit and crochet, right? And if you've ever done any kind of knitting or crocheting or any kind of needlework, right? At the beginning and for a very, very, very long time, it doesn't look like anything, right? You're like, am I actually making something here? But eventually you turn the corner and you're like, oh, it's a scarf, right? You can actually see that it's going to kind of come out. But, for hours prior, it doesn't really look like anything. It doesn't look like it's going to work, right? So, this compound effect is what we want to be looking for and looking to try to achieve by taking these small acts and remaining true to our vision, etc. So, just kind of go through this. When you think about your goals, once you have your goals set in place, you have your vision set in place, you want to start to think about those small steps that you can take, right? So um it could be monthly, it could be weekly. You would ideally want to get it down to daily. Like, what are those small daily actions that you can take that again are going to compound themselves? For a couple of you, you've been in the goal setting program that I've talked about before. This is an integral part of the goal setting program because what we do is we do weekly accountability emails. And these weekly accountability emails are individual for each person. And they actually, so the person would email me, so you guys would email me, and you'd say, here's what I accomplished this week. And here's what I want to accomplish next week. So we focus on these really small steps. And if you did it, great, we celebrate. And if you struggled, we talk about that, right? We brainstorm what else you could do. We look at what you might be able to do different, or we look at where that resistance is, right? And be able to address that. And I've applied this actually to, I know I've shared that I've been learning German, right? So I went back and I looked at my big goal of learning German, and my goal was by my deadline is next week. My goal was by Christmas to be able to speak German and understand German well enough that when we have calls with my nephew and his girlfriend and her family, that I would be able to speak to them in German, right? That was my goal. That was my vision. I could see it, etc. I actually didn't take all of those small steps along the way. Thank you. All the small steps along the way that I actually needed to get to that goal. I'm not there, right? Because I sat there and said, okay, here's the small little steps, here's the things I need to do. And even though this was really important, I let those slip away from time to time. Now, what was fascinating about going back and looking through this, right? They were exactly what I just talked about. They were these small little pieces of, oh, it's a really nice day today. I'm not going to do my German today. I'm going to take a walk, right? Or, oh, it's been such a busy day. I'm not going to do my German today. I'm exhausted, right? Okay, all of these little things got me to this place right here on December 17th, right? Where now I am way far ahead than I was back in March or April when I started. I can read German, I can understand German, I can speak German, not fluently or not enough to be able to have kind of a conversation over FaceTime. But I'm not where I wanted to be because I missed those small steps, right? So it's very easy for us to not take the small steps. And we have to think about what is that accountability, whether it's our accountability to ourselves or accountability to someone else. It could be our partner, it could be our, our best friend, it could be our colleague. It doesn't matter, right? But who am I going to be accountable to in order to help me stay the course? And I will tell you, my accountability person for my German was my nephew. And that accountability of just about every week meeting with him and having to fess up to say, I didn't do my homework this week, or I didn't do, what I needed to do this week. It was hard, right? But every time I did that, it reminded me I need to get back into doing what I'm doing. As a side note, one of the things that I've been doing on those times when I'm like, "Oh, I'm too tired to study German," I found alternatives, right? So we're going to talk about kind of obstacles and solutions in a second, but I found alternatives. I found that I could actually free live stream a German television station or collection of stations through my smart television, and so I can actually watch German television. And that's what I'll do now when I'm just like, okay, I can't get into my book work, but I could okay, this sounds crazy. I could live stream Sesame Street and work on my vocabulary, right? But, you know, if I hadn't had Jeff there as my accountability person, I probably wouldn't have thought about how do I overcome some of these obstacles so I can stay true to, my goal to the best of my ability. All right. So, what small steps can you take and what kind of accountability can you put in there so that you ensure that you're taking those steps or dealing with those obstacles? And that leads us to talking about obstacles, right? just like with my German lessons, and any other big goal that we have, there are going to be the obvious obstacles, right? That we'll probably plan for and look at, but there may be some less obvious obstacles that we don't necessarily plan for, or we don't necessarily look at, and therefore we don't take action. This is the second part of taking action. The first is the small steps. The second is we have to really identify those obstacles. And so let's say you wanted to climb a mountain, right? That was your goal. And your goal was to climb the mountain in 9 months, right? And you've selected this mountain. Maybe you want to climb one of the Alps. Maybe you want to climb, I don't know, Mount Rainier out on the West Coast or something like that, right? So you identify the fact that you've got to train. Like, you can't just go to a mountain and say, huh, hey, Mount Everest, I think I'm going to climb you today, right? You've got to train. So you identify that, you create your action plan, you create your training schedule, you're good to go, right? The second thing that you realize is, gosh, you know what? I don't even know what kind of gear to get. So you do your research, you figure out what gear to get. But there was this obstacle that was sitting out there that you never identified, you never really thought about, and that was actually to learn more about the mountain itself, right? So, like, when is the best time for a novice mountain climber to climb this particular mountain? You may not have even, like, that might not have, like, entered your mind. You just said, "Hey, you know what? Next September, I wanna climb this mountain." Well, that might not be the best time to climb that mountain, or maybe they close it down at different points in time. Having lived on the West Coast, right? The Olympia Mountains, actually, the mountain passes get closed, right? It's usually about October, the end of October. The mountain passes start to close down, and you can't actually get across the mountains, right? In a car. Climbing you could, but in a car you can't. Like, if you didn't know that and you said, you know what, I think, the end of October is when I want to climb this mountain, you might not actually be able to get there, right? So what happens with these obstacles is they sit there very quietly, and although we're getting our training done, and although we're learning about the gear, right? We haven't done anything about this obstacle of understanding the mountain. And, we keep, like, kind of going, yeah, I'm going to do that in September. I'm going to do that in September. And then all of a sudden September rolls around and you can't do it. Right. Or there's something going on, if you're trying to do mountain climbing, let's say, and they're running the Tour de France, you might not be able to, climb those mountains during those times or be in those villages during those times. I don't know that for a fact, but so now all of a sudden things get all off track, right? Or maybe you discover this in July and now all of a sudden you lose all your momentum, right? We want to think about obstacles that are going to get in our way that might be a little bit more silent, than perhaps those obvious obstacles. And this is where we're going to do a little bit of an activity. So on that piece of paper that I asked you to kind of take out, I want you to think about a potential goal that you may have for yourself. It could be one that you actually have set, it could be one that you're working on, or it could be just an example for yourself, right? And I want you to write down a couple of obstacles that you can already see about that particular goal, right? So let's say you wanted to travel to France next year, right? And one of the obstacles are COVID, right? And you might not be able to control that, but COVID is an obstacle. Again, maybe it's, the travel itinerary is an obstacle because you don't have that. You don't even know kind of where you want to go. You need to do research. But also, speaking French, it could be an obstacle. And you might not actually kind of identify the fact that you have to speak French in order to be able to travel in France the way you want to travel, right? Just go ahead and list out a couple of those types of obstacles. And When you have those, you can just give me a thumbs up or whatever for those of you who are live, and then we'll take the next step. So, a couple of obstacles, great. You see some thumbs up. Excellent. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a little scenario to be able to get some practice in this. All right. Okay. Good, good. Great. All right. So if you have your obstacles, most of you have your obstacles down now. What I'd like you to do is choose one of those obstacles. If you wrote more than one, choose one obstacle. And what I want you to do is I want you to write down some of the actions that you would need to take in order to handle that particular obstacle. So if I use the travel to France piece, and I choose speaking French. This is an obstacle I hadn't really thought about. Maybe some of those action steps might be, okay, I need to research where I could learn how to speak French. Maybe I need to research the best online programs. Maybe I need to purchase Rosetta Stone. Maybe I need to enroll in a French class. And don't critique, just kind of write down some of these solutions to one of the obstacles that you have on your list. And again, no critique, just kind of, off the top of your head, think about what you might have to do. And they can be really small actions like research, like get a book, like, listen to a podcast, um, whatever it might be. So just write a few of those down. Okay. Once you have a couple of those, then just give me once again a thumbs up for those of you who are live. Okay, great. Excellent. All right. And again, this doesn't have to be the be all or end all list. Fabulous. All right. So now, what I would have you do if we were in a live session, I would actually have you rip up the obstacle. But for our purpose today, I want you to put a big X through that particular obstacle. All right. Just go ahead and put an X through it. Or if you are on your computer, go ahead and do a strike through, right? Because now you actually have the steps to overcome that obstacle, right? So it's really not an obstacle. It's about taking action on those steps. It's about adding those steps to your action plan so that you can overcome that obstacle. The power of this small activity is monumental because we don't realize how those obstacles get in our way, right? They mentally sit there. They like, oh, I can't do that or whatever. If you ever hear yourself say that, the next question is why, right? Oh, I can't do that. I can't cut down my own Christmas tree. I can't, bake a cake. Why? Why? What is the obstacle? Do you not have a good cake recipe? Do you not have a saw? Right? Whatever it is, really think about, kind of what are those obstacles, and then what can you do to actually overcome that obstacle, to solve for that obstacle, right? And you'll be surprised because a lot of the actions are relatively small. Some may go over long term, right? Like learning French, but maybe you just need to learn basic French so that you don't get lost on the train, right? Or maybe your one of your solutions is, you start to research tour directors, um, like private tour directors that can take you to all the different places and speak the French for you. That could be a solution that you come up with. But now you don't have that standing in your way of planning this trip to France. Right? So very, very, very powerful activity to be able to overcome some of those obstacles and actually then start to take the actions that you need to achieve your goals. So, what do you want to do next? Right? So, the first thing is review your goals if you've been working on setting your goals. If you haven't set your goals yet, then obviously that's number one, right? What do those goals look like, etc. And then look at what are those big actions that need to be broken down into some of those smaller steps, right? So if it's, I want to clear my house of clutter and I have, okay, I want to go through all of my clothes, or I want to clean the basement or whatever it is, right? Are there, is, if that's too big, do I need to break it down? Right. And so what does that look like broken down? And when you're breaking these things down and you're starting to get yourself organized, you can actually start working on a plan of what does this look like from a time frame perspective, right? So if I want to have the house kind of clear of clutter by this time next year, maybe for January, February, March, I want to work on the basement, and then April, May, and June I want to work on the attic or whatever, right? I can start to kind of put these into compartments as then breaking them down after that. Third step is identify those obstacles. And this might be an ongoing process. So I want you to stay open to that. Identify those obstacles, whatever they may be, right? Write them down. If you can start to break out some solutions to them, great. Some might be bigger than you think, and you can't break them down right away, or you don't have solutions to them, but write them down anyway, because what that does mentally is that it actually triggers in your head kind of this ability to start to solve the problem, even if you're not consciously thinking about it. So your subconscious goes to work on it to be able to solve for that. And then when you come up with some solutions, go ahead and jot them down. And then what we want to start to think about as we get closer to starting to work toward our goals, what is that daily plan of action? So, you might be starting at the year, breaking it down to a quarter, breaking it down to a month, breaking it down to a week, but you ultimately want to get to what is that daily plan of action? What are those very small steps like drinking the glass of water that you want to accomplish to be able to move you towards your goals, right? And in that, is there somebody that you could utilize as an accountability, kind of go to, right? And again, it could be something as simple as, even just if you think about like losing weight and you think about any of the weight loss programs, they always have some kind of component of a check-in, right? Is there something, someone you could check in with, right? So that once again, you're motivated to say, I'm going to choose the water, right? Because I have to check in on my goal. All right. So the three things again that we've talked about: getting those long-term goals right in place, creating that compelling vision, and today really being able to take the actions that you need, not just create the plan of action, but take the actions to be able to achieve your goals. I know that if you utilize these steps, you are definitely going to be moving toward those goals. I know for a fact that they work. I have used them. And I also know that when you don't use them, you struggle to be able to get your goals. So let's really kind of commit to moving forward with our goals and taking these small actions so that 12 months from now, 6 months from now, 3 months from now, whatever your time frame is, you can look back at today and say, "Look at what I did." All right? So, I want to thank you. We are going to end the recording now, go into our Q&A, and once again, as always, I will go ahead and share those questions with you. All right? So, have a great day, and I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.